M3GAN 2 was dead on arrival already in its opening weekend, but to anyone hoping it might have legs, those hopes were dashed already in its second weekend, when it plummeted down the charts and couldn't even collect 4 million for a total of 18 million after 2 weeks in release. The movie's producers have now spoken out about what they think caused the movie to fail so badly, but they left one thing out, and strategically. That was the same thing which did the car brand Jaguar in. They gambled everything on a minuscule audience that couldn't sustain them. Let's dive in. Before we get into the reason the producers would not touch, let's begin with what the filmmakers will admit to. Producer Jason Blum appeared on the Town podcast, where he said he was in a death spiral of depression as he saw the opening weekend numbers come in, before admitting where they had gone wrong, saying, "We all thought M3GAN was like Superman. We could do anything to her. We could change genres. We could put her in the summer. We could make her look different. We could turn her from bad guy into a good guy, and we kind of classically overthought how powerful people's engagement was, really, with her." In so saying, he confirmed what we said in our postmortem right here on this channel several days before he made this admission. Maybe in time they could have done a genre switch on M3GAN, but this wasn't the time. The image of M3GAN does not have anywhere near the mass recognizability required that they can turn her into a hero, at least not yet. We've seen such switches happen before. Even Freddy Krueger went from being a scary killer of children to being a smash hit with children. But achieving that took quite a few movies, a spin-off TV series, and lest we forget, tons and tons of merchandise released over multiple years as the brand expanded. And even then, it should be stressed that Freddy never pulled a Terminator 2 and helped the Dream Warriors against a larger foe. All self-gratulation aside, there were other reasons as well. Jason Blum highlighted that on the first movie they took their time to get things right, while on the second movie they not only changed everything up, they were committed to a release date up front, so things got a little bit rushed. What he strategically did not comment on though was how well it worked to turn M3GAN into, a rainbow icon, going all in on all things LGBTQIAP+, to the point of putting a major puff piece out in Out magazine, where it was stated, "Loyal, impeccably dressed, and with killer dance moves, M3GAN became the breakout robot of 2023 and an instant gay icon. This summer she's back in M3GAN 2.0 with a growth spurt, a new blowout, and protecting her person, Katie, even more fiercely while still challenging her creator, Gemma, at every turn. If that weren't queer icon status enough, she's an out digital cover star and a proponent of chosen family with a message for her LGBTQ+ fans.
Being a gay icon is my default setting. To the alphabet mafia, I see you. I slay for you, and thanks for being so silly online with me. Keep serving that energy, babies."
You see, being firmly entrenched in the Hollywood bubble, like so many others, the makers of M3GAN genuinely thought DEI was the way to expand the audience and make more audience segments that otherwise weren't going to show up, all while tacitly assuming that the real built-in hothead audience were locked in anyway, no matter how many other segments they tried to include. 2 weeks prior to the movie opening, The Hollywood Reporter put out the piece How M3GAN Doubled Down on Its Very Gay, Very Online Fan Base, in which they wrote, "After the Universal movie about a murderous, artificially intelligent doll opened in January of 2023, it became a sleeper hit, grossing 180 million worldwide against a 12 million budget, thanks in part to some very ardent, very online gay moviegoers." Key bit here being thanks in part to them. But just how big part, or more accurately, how small? The problem in the Hollywood bubble is that they vastly overestimate this minuscule segment of the audience, which is apparent from this very piece. So in it, again published 2 weeks before the movie was set to open, we in retrospect see clearly that they were headed for box office doom, because as we established in our postmortem, which you'll find in the description if you haven't seen it already, the built-in audience for M3GAN was the horror audience, not the queer audience. Yes, there is some minor overlap between the two, but not nearly as much as the filmmakers seemed to think. So if you step over the line with queerness, the horror audience is going to drop out, leaving only the queer audience, and that audience on its own can't sustain anything with a budget of more than $1 million. Yet this is who they were gunning for as the piece continues. The marketing campaign for M3GAN 2, which opens June 27th, is seeking to woo the original's gay audience back to theaters, ideally with even more of their friends and some heterosexual women too. In other words, they marketed the movie at the queer audience, hoping they would bring their straight cat lady girlfriends. But they were convinced they had it right, as the piece continues. In a bit of strategic counter-programming, M3GAN 2's release date places the PG-13 horror sequel opposite Apple and Warner Brothers' Brad Pitt racing film F1, smack in the middle of a box office season typically devoted to straight male skewing action movies and family fare. We love being in summer and trying to be a big event alongside the options primarily for guys, says Michael Moses, Chief Marketing Officer of Universal Pictures. We believe there's demand for something catering to young females and gay audiences. Well, that belief on behalf of Michael Moses, who incidentally later in the piece proudly declares himself gay, just cost Universal a fortune, because he believed wrong, or at any rate, he vastly overestimated the number of gay audiences with straight cat lady girlfriends. But he isn't the only one. The Hollywood Reporter concluded their piece by quoting Heather O. Petrocelli, author of Queer for Fear, Horror Film and the Queer Spectator, as saying, "Universal's open appeal to queer audiences on behalf of M3GAN 2 is unusual and welcome," she says. What's new is that major studios are finally acknowledging our position, not as a niche demographic, but as a core audience driving the horror genre. Except doing so is what drove M3GAN 2 straight into the ground, as we now know. Because, as it turns out, the LGBTQIAP+ audience is a niche demographic, and not a core audience driving the horror or any other genre. There is an even bigger example of that making headlines right now, namely Jaguar, or Jaguar, which I guess is closely to how connoisseurs want to hear it pronounced. We've covered them before, and how the classic British car brand for distinguished gentlemen of success and means was rebranded into the, well, environmentally friendly queer mobile, which comes in 2 colors, corresponding to those in the trans flag. Now, 1 year later, we have some data. In Europe, Jaguar sales have collapsed by a whopping 97.5%. And I've heard circumstantial reports that the used car market is flooded by classic Jaguars, as the built-in audience are getting rid of theirs like hot potatoes. The official narrative from Jaguar is that this sales decline is to be expected, as they've stopped making their old and boring cars, while their new eco-friendly queer mobiles in the colors of the trans flag won't be out for some time yet. And when they are, then they will surely fly off the showroom floors, as the same audience that wasn't sizable enough to sustain M3GAN 2 will no doubt redeem the Jaguar rebranding.
You serious?
So, what have we learned? There is nothing wrong with aiming at the queer audience per se, but be aware that inclusion is exclusion. So if you have a different built-in audience, then know that the more you intentionally try to include other audiences, you might unintentionally exclude your built-in audience. So budget and plan for that accordingly. This is where the makers of both Jaguar and M3GAN 2 failed so miserably, because in attempting to reach the queer audience, they lost the audience they already had. and the audience they already had is what drove their success. Let me know your thoughts on this in the comments.